Good morning. I'm Barbara Ramsey, a member of Williamsburg City Council, and I'd like to welcome you to the Williamsburg Area Art Commission's Fall Forum. While we wish we could be together in person, we are excited to have you here. The region has a long history of supporting the arts and culture in our community, and today it's more important than ever. The past year and a half have been difficult for everyone, and the arts are no exception. But with that comes creativity. Area arts organizations have worked tirelessly to find new ways to connect with audiences while keeping their artists and performers working and engaged. Those efforts do not go unnoticed, and we appreciate all you have done to keep the arts alive and active in Williamsburg. Today's workshop, Shaking the Money Tree, Grants and How to Get Them, is designed to help you with these ongoing efforts. On behalf of Williamsburg City Council, thank you to the Area Arts Commission, Pat Rubline, Chair, Bob Leake, Vice Chair, Georgiana Avioli, Susan Corbett, Robin Phillips, Tom Phelps, Barbara Vollmer, and Nick Vretos, and to all of the nonprofit organizations here today that help make our community stronger. Thank you. Have a great forum.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramsey. It was really nice of you to come and give us such a hearty welcome. We're really proud of the arts organizations in our region, and really for several reasons. For the most part, you all have come through a very difficult time, and this pandemic, you've managed to keep functioning. We haven't lost anybody, and your mission to continue to offer quality programs has really helped the communities that you serve. We know this was not easy, and it isn't easy, and that revenue hits have been more than a challenge. We chose the theme for this workshop with the mission to focus and assist with arts funding. We are fortunate to have folks on our commission who we hope will offer you some new options to expand on financial resources, and that you already have begun building back your budgets. Two of our commissioners, Tom Phelps and Robin Phillips, bring their knowledge and firsthand experience to that effort. Tom is retired after 34 years as the director of the Division of Public Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities, and we are so fortunate to have him as a commissioner. He spent many years there working with grants to arts and cultural organizations. Robin Phillips has spent a few years on the commission, and she has had good success as a grant writer. So I hope all of this will be very interesting for you. With that, I'll turn the program over them to begin. If you have questions during their presentations, just click that little chat button down at the bottom and type your questions. That would really be the preferred way, and then they can get to your questions as they speak. So we'll keep track of them for them. Anyway, I will now turn this over to Tom and Robin. Thanks so much.
My name is Tom Phelps. Good morning to you all. Robin and I are going to try to make a presentation today that will particularly give you some concept about seeking grants, and maybe not so much of the particulars, but we'll get into both kinds of seeking, grant writing, grant finding, and all the kinds of things that go with it. Robin, you want to say hi?
Yes, I'll just say by way of introduction, I am not a professional grant proposal writer. I'm not even a very experienced proposal writer. I've only been doing this since the start of the pandemic, so just 20 months now. And yet, in those 20 months, my proposals have brought in so far 17 grants, totaling more than $262,000. So my message to you is, if I can do this, so can you. And today I'll be sharing what I've learned about how to get started and what works. And if I can leave you with just one rule that is the most important rule, and we'll hit this again during the presentation, follow the directions exactly. Back to Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. We're going to have you ask your questions during the presentation, but Joanna is going to keep them here, and we'd like to take the question and answers after the presentation. We just find that easier. Don't think we won't get to them. So if you have questions along the way, go ahead and put them into the chat, and we'll get to at the end. This is called Shaking the Money Tree, Grants and How to Get Them. Idea being that if we shake the tree, some funding will fall out of it. But what we have found is it's probably not quite that easy. First of all, it's hard to find the tree. And second of all, it's very difficult to get close and shake it. But what we think is that we can maybe give you some ideas about that. So you have an animation here. Joanna, you want to push that button? Here's the slide. We're going to try and do this way. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about general concepts that happen at the funders level. These are questions and parts of questions that you may ask yourself as you're looking towards seeking grants and getting some support for both your organization and the projects which that organization may do. Here's the questions that are basic to every proposal that usually are asked by those who are going to offer some money. The funders want to know who you are. They want to know why you exist. They really want to know what you do. And in particular, they want to know, how do you do it? Slide. This is an animation part. And I want to put these kinds of things together here because who you are and why do you exist have to do with your own vision and values. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But the vision and values of your organization are so very, very important in fundraising because you're going to express who you are and why you exist in terms of vision and values in order for the funders to be able to know what it is that you're seeking to do. Then it asks, what do you do and how do you do it? These particular questions really equal the mission of your organization because you will be able to express in the mission, what do you do and how do you? Next slide. I have not chosen for any particular reason a couple of vision and value statements and a couple of mission statements. Not because I think they're particularly wonderful, although I think they're good or I wouldn't have chosen them. One I helped to write having to do with the library in Williamsburg, but I wanted to just start with the Richmond Ballet because it is a company that expressed, I think, decent vision and values. And here's what it says. The Richmond Ballet aspires. This is a nice word. This is a word that might help you to show what it is that you do, how you can, why you exist and who you are. It aspires, this group aspires to help transform our world through the unique and special power of dance. You get now already aspiring and transforming some kinds of presentation, a powerful art form, dance. And it says then, by training and presenting ballet dancers as the ultimate artists and athletes who inspire us by demonstrating unlimited human potential and beauty. So an organization that does something and can do why they exist. And through the work of the Richmond Ballet, this community, that's the who. How do you do it? What do you do? We'll continue to move towards one that universally respects the value of human life. There's a value of human life, both physical and emotional, the power of cooperation and mutual respect. The works then go on to tell us that there's some respect, there's some cooperation, there's some work ethic and discipline, and it finally ends up with that there is joy. Now, that's a hard word to prove, joy, but if they're presenting this kind of dance of existing in the compassionate community. So what they're trying to do is show what they would ultimately achieve by doing what they do. Now, as they go on, next slide, please, is the mission. And the mission then starts to be more explicit. And I want to pay particular attention to some of the words here. It's dedicated to the promotion, preservation, continuing evolution of the art form of ballet through, here we go, performance, training, education, and integrity. And they wish to use those things to keep dance alive and to foster new work. So what we know about them is that they perform, they do educational kinds of things, integrity, and they want to keep dance alive, and they want to foster new work. So all of those tell us enough about that organization that a funder begins to know through the reading of those particular statements what this organization does. Now, in a different kind of approach, the Williamsburg Library Friends has also some vision and values. Let's look at those. I want to change gears here a little bit, because the Williamsburg Regional Library Friends is really a foundation. So we're not looking at this at the performance level, but we're looking at this as a way in which the foundation might raise money for the organization. It's not a bad idea to think through the notions. You will indeed have some vision and values and a mission statement in and of the notion of raising money as well. So what are some of their values? I'm not going to go through every one of these. You can see them, and you will have a copy of this and can see it again on video, so you can go back and study it more. But here's some words: trust, stewardship, civility, innovation, collaboration, and future focus. Quiet foundation on all of that. Well, trust is very important, because when you're raising money, the people that are donating must trust you. Stewardship becomes very important, because you have to honor that philanthropic priority. In other words, if someone says, here is a gift to do X, then X is what you ought to be doing. The civility is that the respect for each other's views and opinions, so that they know those kinds of things. And innovation. We employ innovative approaches to help our library face challenges, develop new programs, and to plan for the future. This is the hint that being innovative in the fundraising helps the library itself to do the kinds of things it is doing. And collaboration, this is something that Robin and I will talk about more in upcoming. But collaboration is a very important thing, because what it does is it brings people together to support the organization. In other words, we partner with us in order to amplify our own efforts. And so that's why that word becomes important. And it's future focused. We're not trying to do the same old with new money, but in fact, we fund the vision of the library now and into the future. So what does that library plan on doing? Now, this will result then in a mission statement, which is the next slide, Joanna. The Friends invite everyone. Okay, so the Friends is really that foundation that invites everyone to support the Williamsburg Regional Library through fundraising and advocacy. So that's what it does. What do? We raise money and we advocate for the organization. And why do we do this? We do this to ensure in library programs and services. Okay, now those are the words that start to be the verbs, you see. Library programs and services. These are the things we do, both now and for the generations to come. So we invite support for fundraising and advocacy to do programs. Now, this tells a funder that you are seeking support to do library programs and services, the ones that are ongoing and the ones that will be in the future. So I encourage you all to think carefully about the vision statement and mission statement, because the vision statement and the mission statement begin to give funders the first notion of who you are and what you do. And when you choose those words carefully, when you're writing an application or seeking support, you can use those particular words as both the verbs and the nouns to then pronounce or make more clear what it is that you're seeking to do. Those are the two important things I think that funders will look for in the beginning. Who are you? What do you do? And then you can begin to write proposals that seek this support. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce you to Robin, who's going to iterate more of what she said to me with, and then I will come up again and talk about my perspective. And what we're trying to do here is set up two perspectives, but both are conceptual. They're not particular, except in some cases. We may be able to get to the particulars through the questions and answers. But first of all, we want to explain the kind of perspectives that we're going to take. Robin's going to take that of the applicant. I'm going to take that of the funder. So Robin, why don't you take it away for a moment here?
Just briefly, we'll talk more about all of these secrets to success as we go along through the forum. But like I said, the single biggest thing that you can do for success is really not a secret. It is just follow the directions. And you'll find as you go out and shake the money tree and look at different sorts of granting organizations, there are a lot of different forms that the proposals are to take. Some of them are online with boxes that you fill in. Others have character limits, or they might not. They might want a Word document that's just a letter. Some require a letter of intent first. And then if they approve that, then you submit the proposal. Others just, you go for it with one shot. So there's a lot of variety. And again, whatever they ask for, follow the directions. The biggest secret to my success has been to invite, and I don't do this, the executive director for the organization does it, invite potential grantors to come and see what you do. Create a relationship and show them what their contribution would actually accomplish. And then the third big secret really isn't a secret either, and that is just hard work. Find and apply to every possible grant that looks like it is a good match for your organization. And we'll talk about how to get that match a little further along. And emphasize how your mission fits with their mission. How are you helping them meet their funding goals by offering them a program that they can fund? And then once you're awarded the grant, adhere to the conditions of the grant. Don't drop the ball after you've got the money. There is follow-up. So plan for that while you are applying for the grant. Be ready to adhere to the conditions of the grant. Tom?
Thanks, Robin. For me, I'm going to try and come at you from the concepts of someone who grants money. I worked for, as Pat said, 34 years at the National Endowment for the Humanities. I wasn't always the director. I was the director for the last 12 years of my career. Before that, I worked as an assistant director in establishing library programs, using media like all of those films that you see, sometimes documentaries, mostly on PBS. Library programs consisted of exhibitions using the kinds of materials found in libraries, manuscripts, documents and also in museums and cultural organizations, especially historical organizations around here. Colonial Williamsburg was one of my grantees, as was the Virginia Historical Society, as were many programs that were done in the libraries throughout. Before that, I was the deputy director at the Salt Lake City Public Library. I worked many times with NEH in order to do programs, and then when the job came to create the programs in libraries, I was in the position. Okay. I've also worked with, as I said, lots of media projects, lots of museum programs, lots of libraries, lots of other kind of cultural institutions. And I taught for 25 years at the University of Maryland in the CLIS, Cultural Libraries and Information Studies college, and I taught there the management and administration of cultural organizations. So that's going to be my point of view, is the whole idea of granting funds, because that's what I did, although Robin and I are going to overlap on many things, because you see that they both do the same things. One is just coming at it from a different point of view. So next slide. I put this in because as the commission was talking, we were trying to say what it is that we do and what it is that gives you hope for what we do, what it is that gives you as an organization for proceeding toward applying for funds for what you do. A slide I've used before, so it's not quite up to date. It goes through 2014, but I thought it illustrated exactly what is going on here. And this is from reports that were done by Carnegie and some other organizations for funds in the arts and the humanities from 1974 to 2014. As you can see, the graph continues to went from $1.4 billion to $17.2 billion in any given year. So, and this is to do something. So what are the projects that earn this support, that bring arts and culture to our citizens for artistic education and entertainment purposes? Projects that inform, educate, and integrate our culture and our heritage, get support from many, many sources. One of those sources is the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission, and this stresses some of the things in our own mission, but I want to again go back to the word crafting here. Bring is an important verb. Brings arts and culture to our citizens. And why does it do that? For artistic, educational, and entertainment purposes. So we want to keep those things in mind. Projects that inform, that educate, that illustrate our culture and our heritage merit support from many sources. These are important things to get into your own vocabulary. We bring projects that inform and educate and illustrate our culture and our heritage. Those are the things that merit support. So I want to encourage you because there's report out there for you, and it comes from many sources. Well, let's see how we can first start to do that. So next slide, Johanna. I want to have you think first about the project. Now, the project can be big in scope, can be small in scope. Maybe it's for one program. Maybe it's for a whole season. Maybe it's for, as we're doing these years with COVID in mind, operational support. Maybe it can't be operational support, but it can be other kinds of things. And so we first want to have the project. What is the project? What does it do? What's it organized to do? What do we want to accomplish by doing it? That's the main text animation. Then there are support sources of support. In other words, you need to know what you're going to do before you go look for the money, because it depends on what you're going to do. The sources of support vary, and different organizations support different kinds of things. So next animation says match them. In other words, we first have the project, now we have to do the research on the sources of support. That's an important kind of thing. So so we want to make sure that that works for our advantage. So I encourage you to think first about what it is you're doing, and then go do a little bit of research so that you can find support, and then you match them. And many of them will overlap. There's no question about that. But on the next slide, we'll see some of the ways that this can happen. First of all, next animation, there are individuals. We forget about this. We're always going for the big or the organizations or the Williamsburg Arts. But remember that donations in small amounts begin to add up, especially if we go to our own board of directors, especially if we go to those people that we think are friends, to those people that may want to back something that we're doing. And I think it behooves us to find out those individuals, whether it's a local arts or cultural group that's looking for money, or a bigger statewide or even national. I mean, there are individuals who support those kinds of things. We need to kind of go out there and do a little research and find out who they are. And of course, there is the next animation, which is the government. Now, this is all kinds of government, federal, state, local. Here is the Virginia area or Williamsburg Area Arts Commission. This is very much a local organization. There is the Virginia-wide state. There is for all of these kinds of things, both the NEA and the NEH. So we need to look at what they do. Most of the time we start to think of maybe the federal agencies or even bigger as something that we can apply for we're too small. I want to tell you that when I worked in NEH, we funded as many small organizations as we did large ones. And often we funded smaller ones through some of the large ones. So we always want to see what the other arts and cultural organizations are doing around the area or even nationally so that we can tap into those resources as well. And I'll give you some more examples of that in a minute. And next is the private foundations. These are some things we're going to talk about a little bit in the next couple of slides and going after, as well as corporations. And remember, when you're thinking about corporations, there's not only the big, gigantic corporations that we always think of funding all of those kinds of things that we might see on PBS or something, or big exhibitions or theater presentations or dance, but corporations around the area, banks, other kinds of corporations, even local gas stations I've seen give quite a bit of money to the arts organizations around. The next is small businesses. I mean, there are small businesses around, you all know this, that will give you perhaps small donations, but nonetheless, if we get a few of them, they add up and they start to contribute to something that the bigger ones say, oh, because they're raising this money, we'll give them some too. And of course, finally, nonprofit organizations. So these are your sources, and they're out there and they're available. Robin's going to talk for a minute about how she goes about approaching each of these. Robin?
Matching sources. Once you have your list of potential funders, and we'll talk about how to find potential funders, before you do a whole lot of work on applying, ask yourself if your organization is a good fit for their organization. Because just like you, grantors have mission statements. So for example, if a grantor focuses on opportunities for children, then you should show them how your project benefits children. Or if you have a project already in mind that focuses on kids, like arts for kids in school age groups, or arts for disabled kids, let's say, you'll want to find a grantor whose focus is on funding opportunities for disabled kids. Make it match. By helping you, they are then furthering their own goals. So how do you do this? You look at their websites if they have them. Not everyone does. Look at their IRS Form 990s, if applicable, because not all funders are nonprofits and they might not have a 990. What are you looking for? Who are they giving to? If you look at their past 990s, you can see a list of who they've been giving money to in past years and how much they've been giving. So you'll see their range, and you'll know not to ask, over ask or under ask. You'll keep it within the range that they typically like to hand out. And you can see if there are organizations similar to yours on the list in the 990, in the Form 990. To find the Form 990, you just go to the IRS website, and up at the top of the IRS landing page, there is a button for charities and nonprofits. Click that, and there will be kind of a sequence of pages. Keep following the links to the charitable organizations. You can find them by name or by EIN. And there you can find their 990s publicly. So you don't have to dig around on websites, and they all are there at the IRS. So stay within their targets for funding, stay within their mission sets, look at the population they're serving, look at the geographic area they're serving. Some are nationwide, some are very local. And if the organization doesn't have a website, as I said, you can just look at the 990. One important part of the 990 is there is a block in there, I believe it's block 15. If they do not accept unsolicited applications. They will check a box that says, you know, we don't accept unsolicited applications. If they have that block checked, don't apply. That's a waste of time. They will accept invitation, or they will accept applications by invitation only. So that's pretty much how I go about looking for sources to match. I do use some databases that are online. We'll talk a little bit more about online databases that help you find organizations that match your mission. And so when we get to that point, I'll have a little bit more to say about that. Tom?
All right, next slide. This is kind of for information purposes. We're not going to go to any of these, although they're hot. But I wanted to say that you can start at the top. Many of these organizations have interesting step-by-step grant-making instructions, not for just themselves, but for all kinds of other grant-making organizations. So it would behoove you a little bit, I think, to go into some of these links and just scroll around a little, because they also mention the other kinds of agencies that fund the kinds of things that you want to do. And sometimes, as the Council on Foundations does, as does the Foundation Center, they get into the nitty-gritty of area-wide sources of funding, so that they say, we fund these big things, but we're also funding these grant-making organizations who fund you. So it's a step-down process that you can look at: the Council on Foundations, Foundation Center, Grantcraft, and Grantsmanship Center. The last one I put on there is the grants.gov. I suggest that you go into this particular website, because it is, in fact, all of the grant-making organizations of the federal government. And in it, it gives you the accessibility to what's called a DUNS number. Your organization should have one, no matter how small. Sometimes you think just because we only play the flute and we only perform at a couple of local sites, that there is no reason for federal money to come to you. But no matter how that federal money comes, you must have a DUNS number to get it. So it would be good for you to go to these sites. These sites are available, and you'll get a set of these which make them hot. Next slide. Oh, I should say too that in those websites for each of those big organizations, the 990 is included. They also publish the 990 right on their website, so you can see them. There are also lots and lots and lots of information URLs that are more specific in grants making possibilities. And in order to show one of these, Robin is going to look at this slide, and she will tell you which of the hot things, Joanna, that you should be able to click onto. Robin, you want to do that?
Thank you. So these are examples of websites where you can actually go hunt for grants that fit your organization. The nonprofit that I've been working with uses GrantWatch, they use GrantStation, and they use GrantSeeker. They also use Inside Philanthropy, and I think one more, which escapes my mind at the moment. My favorite for actually managing my grants is GrantSeeker. And if you can click on that, we can just take a quick look at what it looks up. Well, so much for that.
Well, it was hot yesterday.
Anyway, I mainly use it for keeping track of my proposals as they go through the application process. It's very easy to use. It's very intuitive. And I can upload documents to it. I can put in due dates. It will send reminders to my email, so I can track when I should be filing reports, when I should be filing applications, when there's a letter of intent coming up for all the different organizations. So there is a free version if you want to explore it. grantseeker.flux.io there. And you can put notes in there about your funders or your potential funders. And you can even store things like photos. For example, if you had, sorry about that. If you have some sort of a project, like let's say you needed new theater costumes or something, and you want to show people how raggedy your current theater costumes are, you can upload a photo to your application and say, this is the state of our costumes. And then when you file your report, you can upload a photo of your new costumes that got funded. So that kind of thing has an impact if your granting agency will accept photos. But the other thing that these things will offer, a lot of them have actual educational resources for you that will tell you about how a grant process typically works. They might have sample documents that you can use as a basis to develop your own documents. And they also have different agencies represented. So sometimes I will look for, let's say, I want to find everybody who will write grants or everybody who will offer grant opportunities for ballet in Virginia, let's say. And I'll run that through my favorite grant seeker, and I'll get a certain number of organizations. But then if I go over to GrantStation and ask it the same question, there will be some overlap, but there will be a few differences. And this is why it's kind of important to belong to more than one of these databases, because they will return different results and you'll get more opportunities that way. So for hunting for the grant opportunities, remember, no database has all the opportunities listed. One thing you will not find in any database is a lot of the family foundations. They don't end up in the databases, but they are out there. And those are very often local. They have a very local focus, and you typically learn about those just by your own personal and professional networking. So once you have your list of possibilities, you have to then closely examine each potential funder to see if they're a good fit. And that goes back to matching the sources. So back to you, Tom.
Okay, the next slide. This is the same kind of thing for sources that are dealing directly with fine arts or arts, dance, and theater. So you may want to contact any of these. They're again listed. All of these give some grant sources or talk about their own granting capabilities, and you should be familiar with all of them. When you go to arts.gov, NEA, for example, we're not going to go there, but there are sources that are in that particular website that start to talk about local organizations as well. For statewide, you all know this one, probably the Virginia Commission for the Arts, not only grants money, but starts to give you some aid and help in how to get it. So that's there and that's available. The next slide, please. If your project focuses on social issues, and many of them do, I've seen many of your programs and plays, for example, in the local area. I'm quite an advocate for the arts and culture here. And I've gone to many of them, and I know that some of the kinds of projects that you do, maybe even particular performances, could get grants from some of these organizations. And so I urge you to at least look at them and others. The thing that I find here is when we go to the MacArthur Foundation, which is the Mac Foundation in here, we start to see listings of all kinds of other things that are like the Mac Foundation. So some of them we know well, like the Gates Foundation or the Carnegie, but some of them we don't know so well, and they do similar kinds of things. So I just encourage you to look at these kinds of things. We think of these as big resources, those that only fund big projects and maybe for big money, but little stories and cooperative funders and partners often make grants to the smaller organizations. So a good place to do some research is within these databases. Next slide, please. This is true when you break down to the kinds of funding you do. As before, you can find references to the smaller and more local sources of support or applications to be part of large grants at the local level. For example, NEH used to be very large grants to things like the American Library Association and the American Historical Association and some other kinds of things. But all of these grants had components in them for granting to small organizations to do similar kinds of things, or to take already, let's say, prearranged exhibitions to smaller sites. And so it's worth seeking these organizations, especially if your project's focused on education or on K through 12. These are particulars you can go look at. Next slide, please. It's also interesting to me that you can find particular resources and sources of funding if you're doing something on a particular group. Here's some ideas from the National Asian, the National Black Programming Consortium, National Foundation for Jewish Culture, and the Italian American Foundation. And there are many, many more of these which you can find. So as in the previous slide, often these sources fund huge projects. For example, there was one on Black women rights. It was an exhibition that went around to small museums all over the country that included not only the arts created by illustrators and so forth of some of these works, but the titles and manuscripts and other kinds of things for these. Carnegie has done this, for example, on the literature of Islam, so huge exhibitions about Islamic literature that went around to associations and groups all over the country in order to be able to get those out. So those are often available too and might be worth seeing. So let's see the next slide. Match sources of funding with projects needing support. I don't know how many times we can say this, but this is really important to do. And the next thing is really on this animation that Joanna will bring up, which says, establish your timeline to fit the source's deadlines. So all of us have published deadlines, have places where you have to apply. Many of them are a year in advance at least, some of them are more. We want this to say, establish your timelines to fit theirs, not thinking that you can jam your timeline into theirs, because that does not work. Robin has some ideas about this and she'll share them with you now too.
Like Tom says, can't hammer this enough. This goes to follow the directions. And it also goes to using a tool like the tool I use, Grantseeker, which sends me the reminders. And what I usually do in Grantseeker, when I put in the actual deadlines that I get off of a funder's website or out of their instructions, I'll say like, okay, they want their LOI by June 1st. If they tell me to apply for a proposal or to apply for a grant with a full proposal, that will be August 1st. And so I'll put those deadlines in, but then I will also set myself a reminder 2 weeks prior, because I do not want to miss that. I don't want to get a reminder, 1 or 2 days before and then discover that I wasn't really prepared and I didn't have all the information at hand, and I'm going to miss that opportunity. If it's late, it's late. You missed the deadline, and that's it. So follow the directions. And the note here, establish your timeline to fit the source's deadlines. That's not just the application. Remember, there is follow-up. Some places will request not only a final report, but they might want interim reports. I have one grant that's currently active that wants quarterly reports. And so we have to tell them every quarter how much of their money we have spent and what we spent it on. And it's not as hard as it seems, but you definitely have to stay on the calendar and stay on top of it. And early is always better. They appreciate early. I have one funder that habitually forgets to send us the link to an online report that we have to fill out. And so what we do is when the deadline comes around, we send them a Word document in an email and we say, here's our midterm report. And it's not the correct format, but we're showing them, hey, we're on top of it, and here's what we've done with your money, and they love it. And so then they say, well, here's the link. Can you please put this in the electronic format? And we have established a really good relationship with those funders. So again, the timeline is super important. It shows respect for them, respect for what they've done for you, and it will establish a relationship that pays dividends later. Tom?
Thanks, Robin. Can we see the next slide? Okay, the next slide talks about cooperation. And here I just want to iterate the idea that when you involve partners and collaborators, you don't make the project necessarily bigger by allowing these voices to the table, but you certainly can make it better. So what does this collaboration do? Let's see the information here. What it does, from a funder's point of view, is it sees that you have built some expertise into the project. When we see that there's collaboration with others, we notice the demonstration of the value of the project, because others won't buy in if it's not a valuable project. It deepens the reach for your own audience development. It develops points of view, and it widens the availability of, let's say, the performances or the exhibitions or whatever it is that you're doing. Robin will elaborate on this just a bit.
Partners and collaborators, I view two types of partners in the mix. One type of partner is your community partners, your fellow nonprofits with whom you can do joint projects. So to go back to the example of something like disabled children, and you're an arts organization, maybe there is an organization in town that looks for opportunities for kids to get out in the community and get involved, and you can offer an opportunity like that. So that's one type of partnership. Another type of partnership is actually with your granting organization. And again, if you have programs that align really well with their missions, you are in fact helping them to meet their funding goals. So think of yourself not as somebody coming with your hand out saying, I really need some money for my stuff. Think of yourself as a partner that is helping the granting agency to meet their own funding goals. They have the things that they're wanting to accomplish also. So show them how you help them accomplish what they want to do. And think of yourself as the partner in getting their support where they intend it to go. Present yourself that way in your applications. Tom?
We're going to get in, next slide, please. We're going to get in some of the nitty gritty of writing. We're not going to get into details here. We'll look a little bit at the WAC guidelines, but we won't spend long in there. We'll save for questions and answers. But I want to look first at the fundamentals of a good proposal. And the fundamentals of a good proposal really begin with a mission statement. So if we can see the mission is, and again, I use these verbs to present, let's say, I'll use an example that I know, Masterworks concerts. So if you're doing Masterworks concerts, and I'm going to simplify this and oversimplify it, so Carolyn, don't get up with me, but to Masterworks concerts selected by, and we put those kinds of things out, we get the answer to some of these questions. You can do the other ones too. So we see some of these questions begin to get answered. As programs for, let's say, the enjoyment and education of the citizens of Williamsburg. Well, who is it for? And who's on the team? Concerts will be conducted and performed by well-trained and qualified musicians. And what's the plan of work? We're going to do these concerts at, and we're going to offset some of the costs with ticket sales and so forth. So those become the details. But these are the questions. Is it well conceived? Who is it for? Who's on the team? What is the plan of work? Are resources in place, and what will it cost? And this will ultimately end up in another abstract that will detail this in some ways, and might be a little longer than some of the abstracts we're talking about. But if you answer these questions well, you will be able to tell a funder exactly what it is that you want. So what are some of the elements? Well, these repeat themselves a little bit, but the elements of a good proposal begin with the project description or abstract. So if you've written the mission statement well and had your plan of work out there, you'll be able to do that. We always suggest that you put in the project, the next table of contents, so that the funder knows where to turn, look for some things that maybe were missed. They always should include somewhere in them a budget. So this budget is very important. It can be yours, it can be theirs, it can be any way that they would like you to detail this, but what is it worth? And how much of that worth are you asking this funder to support? It needs to look at who it's for, in other words, nature of the request, and that again is the abstract. If you can put the abstract in there in 2 paragraphs, that will tell the funder just about everything that they want to know and what they can reference later. In these elements, maybe we have some things going on. So let's see what a way to formulate this. This is just like prose writing 101. You have an introduction to the subject. You detail how it's going to be disseminated. You detail the audience that it's going to be presented to. We want to know a little of the organization's history, the partnerships that the organization has, the resources other than those that you're asking for, a good plan of work, and what we haven't said yet is this evaluation. And this is the kind of thing that I was talking about. When you want those reports, how are we going to get the information to report back to the funder what you did? So you need to have an evaluation plan. Let's go to the next slide. This is one that Robin knows well, so I'm just going to let her take these away. The first one, there they all are.
Again, this goes to follow the directions, the single most important rule. You have to adhere to the deadline. If you've missed the deadline, it's gone. Maybe you'll have an opportunity next year. Required number of copies, if it comes in hard copy, follow that direction. So far in my 20 months, which granted is not a long time, in my 20 months of doing proposals, there's only one funder that wanted hard copies. Most of it is electronic and online now, or just through email. Submit to a person if possible, yes, and that kind of goes to the relationships. There will be a grant manager, or for family foundations, there should be some particular person who you send this thing to, as opposed to just firing it off to info@. Make sure you're sending it to the right email address. And that's another bit of information that I keep in Grant Seeker. Confirming the submission, yes. If there's a phone number or an email that you can call or send a note and say, hey, just wanted to let you know, and try to get that little handshake. Some websites will actually send you the confirmation. And thank you for submitting your proposal. And when I see that, I will either do a screenshot or download it, or save that in some way. And I will save that in Grant Seeker as well. So I have my whole series of documents. Talking about the elements of the proposal, that's really where the real work goes in. And I'll just say this, when you first start, it's kind of daunting, because the first time you write a proposal, it's kind of huge. But some of the really major parts that you write, like the organizational history, are things that you use slightly modified over and over and over again. So once you've got it done really well one time, a lot of that work is out of the way for future proposals. And a lot of applications ask for the same elements again and again. A list of your board members, your IRS determination letter, and that kind of thing. So I keep those things in a file on my computer where I can just quickly grab them and stick them with any proposal that I'm currently working on. Tom mentioned budget. That needs to be, for the project, it needs to be very clear, easy to read, and show where the money is going. So if I need $500 for paint and $100 for paintbrushes, make yourself a little short, 4 or 5 line chart or table in your document somewhere, or just line by line in an online block where you say, this is my budget. I'm spending $500 on paintbrush or on paint, and $100 on paintbrushes, and $30 on paper palettes, or whatever it is. Show them where the money is going. That's really important. Remember that at the end of the day, there's a human being reading this and deciding whether to hand you the money. So make it very clear and easy to understand, and follow the same sequence of information that they ask for in their instructions. Tom?
Thanks, Robin. We're going to go to guidelines next of the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission. And I'm going to go through these quickly. If you have questions about it, you can put them in the chat. I know you might. We're not going to teach you how to write a proposal for WAC here, but I'm going to use this as an illustration of a couple of words. So if you go first to the grant guidelines, and this you can pull up online yourselves. This is going to be rather small, so I'm just going to, as you pull these up, it tells you exactly who may not apply and who may apply. And these are the kinds of things that we need. So, and it's going to ask you questions like funds expended and how you get the money and so forth. These are questions relatively easy to answer. It also says in there this statement, work with the liaison. Now, the liaisons haven't been assigned except to those grants that we have made. But if you call the office, one of the commissioners would stand to be able to help you with any of the questions that you have. And this will be for those who are applying or those who are awarded. But I put these guidelines up simply to mention that you need to read these carefully and just outline the kinds of things that it asks you to do. It's 2 pages long only. I would pay a particular attention to the checklist for funding because those are the eligibility requirements and you need to fit in there or grants aren't possible. Let's go to the next one. It is the criteria. The criteria for funding become more directions. So you have to be nonprofit, you have to submit electronically, you have to be within the service area, you have to, or try to explain that you're going to reach a diverse audience. And especially if you do try to reach a diverse audience, so in the proposal as well, it has to show sound management in the plan of work and the budget. So sound management is going to balance that budget. It's also going to show that you have sound management qualities because it requires that to even write the proposal. And then, as Robin has said, there is a deadline, so do that. Let's just take a minute to look at the application. The application is pretty clear. Here it comes. That arrow is coming in there somewhere. It's going to click, but I can start. There's also a list of the 2021 recipients. Some advice I can give you is that you might want to talk to any one of those who have received an award, and they will probably be able to help you and or answer questions you might have of getting. We need to go to that.
Tom, it's going to take me a minute to pull up the application because there's not a link here.
It's not in there?
No. So,
okay, well, let's just go to I mean, I think what I will say here is that it's a fillable form and you need to answer the questions. If there are questions that you have, the liaisons or the commissioners or Joanna will try to help you. Don't hesitate to ask. There are things in the application, and I just put a couple of things down here, like who's the president and CAO, and are they different than the creative director? Well, they may be the same. Who wrote the grant? Who's the director of the project? They may be the same. So don't worry about repeating things in those things that are fillable forms, but do fill them out. There are places where it asks you for a little bit more narrative. My suggestion is try to tell a story in 2 sentences or less. The story you tell is going to be important, but try to tell that in 2 sentences or less. And you can point out those things that you want, in particular, the observers to know. The other thing that I would say, there's a budget form in there, but it also allows you to upload your own budget. I think that the detailed budget that you have for yourself is probably better than the one you might try to put into the form. If you can fill out the form, you ought to try to do that, but we can also tell. I always had an illustration that Robin and I used yesterday. Form, if the item costs $7,464 and you are requesting $7,000 from the Williamsburg Arts Commission, we want to know who's funding the $464 that's remaining. You say, well, you don't need to know that because we're only asking you for less. But I know that if you tried to buy that for the $7,000 we might grant you, you would be able to get it. And so if it's important for you to have that, I know I need to know where the other sources of money are. On the other hand, I want you to keep it simple. Say what you need to do what you're proposing to do, and tell us the sources of income, including our money, to pay for it. As simple as that. So say what you need, ask for the sources of income, and tell us where the rest is coming from. You may have some questions about that. We'd be glad to answer them afterwards. Let's go to the next slide. We're getting a little behind and I want to hustle these along. So it has here the criteria for evaluation, and I wanted to spend a moment here so that you know what we're looking for. The next animation is grant-making organizations publish their criteria, as I just showed you for our own. The form wasn't in there, but you can look at that pretty easily. The criteria for evaluation is right in the guidelines. Read it, because that will also give you a hint as to what you need to apply for. Because if they're asking you or telling you how they're going to evaluate it, they're telling you what it is that they want. So I would always read those. The next slide. It's probably important for you to know who makes the funding decisions. Next animation here. The foundations, organizations, agencies, by law, have to explain the process for making grants in their guidelines. It may be a simple one-sentence statement, but read it carefully. Next animation. Generally, the evaluation process conforms to the mission of the foundation itself. What are they trying to accomplish? And then they'll tell you that they'll judge accordingly. It's rarely made by a single individual, and it usually is an evaluative process. So next slide. We can get into this pretty quickly, I think. Most processes, most evaluation process and grant-making processes are staged processes. That is, we receive the application, and the first thing that happens to it is the review for eligibility. I'll give you two examples. At the National Endowment for the Humanities, they had administrative staff that reviewed it for eligibility. That is to say, if it says you have to be a non-organization and it says that you have to be within a certain scope and it says that you have to do a certain thing, there are people that will read that and ensure you've done all of those or it will not be an eligible application. The Arts Commission does that. So she will look at these and make sure that they're eligible. The next stage is it's usually looked at by a panel of peers or boards. The National Endowment for the Humanities, for example, when we would review these huge 500-page applications, even online, we would send it to a panel of reviewers, usually 5 or 7 people, made up of professionals that are doing exactly the same kind of thing as you're proposing for. So if you were doing on the Civil War, for example, there would be Civil War scholars, people who have done film on the Civil War, people who have done exhibition on the Civil War, sitting on the panel. Here, the review by the panel of peers or boards is the commissioners themselves. So get to know who they are. The next order would be reviewed by staff. This is the review of the review. Here, this is done by staff at the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it is really weighing the peer review process itself. What did the peer reviewers say? How did they say it? What does it compare to the next one so that we can get an idea of where the funding should go? The review by staff or the review of the review in the WAC is done by Pat and Joanna, so they look and see that the commissioners have done their job. Then it usually goes to a governing body. In the National Endowment for the Humanities, it went to a national council. These were all people appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate in order to be able to see what the money was going to be spent to do. In the governing body here, it is council members, one of whom introduced us today, Barbara Ramsey. So they will look at these. Then it is usually reviewed by the CEO or the chairman of the board or that kind of person. For NEH, it was the chairman of the endowment, who was also appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. And here at the Arts Foundation, it would be looked at by council members. And they would make the final decisions of both and how much. So let's go then to the evaluation criteria that's going to be looked at by these panels. That's the most important step in the review process. What are they going to look at? They're going to look at the same questions we put out there before. For whom? That is your audience. How are you going to do it? That's the formats. When are you going to do it? That's the plan of work. How much? That's the budget that you're going to include that says how much do you get from let's say the Arts Commission and how much you might get from other sources. It's going to look at who else is supporting it, and that is not just money, but who else might be the collaborators, the organizations that we talked about before, particularly closely at who is doing, all the players, all of the things that are necessary to carry this out, and look at the resources for delivery. So when you're thinking of somebody reading your application, look at it from their point of view. These are the things they're going to look for. These are the things that ought to be told to them. So that's the real deal. That's where they are. We want to talk for a minute about the next slide. This is the strategies for success. I'm going to talk about them one at a time. Robin is going to pick out a couple and share some more explicitly. The first is what you should do in order to have some success is plan well in advance. Start early, arrive on time. I always say if you start early, you're going to get there when you need to be there. The second is have organizational buy-in. That is, if your organization isn't buying into what you want to do, there's no sense in sending an application because you're not going to get it. So you want to get the agency support before you start. The other thing that Robin mentioned is sometimes you might want to get the grant makers buy-in as well. Do they think it's a good idea? Call and ask somebody, talk to them. Third is establish partnerships with the collaborations we talked about earlier. Sure that all the players are sitting at the table and that the points of view are represented in the proposal. It makes it stronger. It just simply makes it stronger. And last, build a team. Projects done by the people who do them. So if projects are getting done by the people that do them, we want to know who that team is and what they're doing. Robin, you have anything additional to say about this?
I'll just highlight the organizational buy-in, and what I'm thinking of there is, in fact, the granting agency. If there is a secret weapon to kind of greasing the skids to getting a grant, I think this one has been very effective in my experience, where the executive director will invite someone over, show them around, show them what he wants the money for, and get them to see why it's important in person. And some people think that there seems to be a little bit of reticence as to whether you should invite a potential grantor over and kind of, maybe it's looked at as schmoozing or whatever, but it's not. It's building that relationship and showing them why it's important to fund this project and how it goes toward meeting their mission goals as well. So that's the secret weapon that I think has been very effective in my experience.
Thanks, Robin. And the last thing we want to do is to point out some pitfalls, because these are things that happen to people all the time. The first one is a proposal that just really preaches and says, we're the best, it's all about us, we're the only ones that can do it, please give us the money, we don't really need to tell you what it's for, but just trust us. We're really good and we know what we're doing. That proposal will fail, surely, so don't do that. The next one is we're going to give it to them, we got it and we're going to give it to them. It's similar to the first one, but those are proposals that read that way and are rhetorical in their pitch are usually cast aside right away by reviewers. And the third is that we know what is best. We as an organization have been doing this for a long time. We have all of this data, we have all of these statistics, and of course we know, and so this is what we're going to do. Sometimes that works a little bit if you can prove that you're the best, but it always behooves you not to say necessarily that you're the best, but in the rhetoric or in the language, and be able to say what it is you're going to do and how well you think you can do it. What it is you're going to do and how well you think you can do it. The next one is rather easy. You can put them all up. These are things you ought not to do. Don't make these kinds of errors. They're picked up by people right away, and it just fuzzies up the proposal. So make sure you spell it right, make sure the grammar is good, make sure the syntax is working, don't have typos. That's especially hard in electronic submissions, but read and reread if you have a chance, and read and let somebody else reread if you have a chance. More pitfalls is when the proposal really lacks organization. This is when you can't tell us all of the things we've asked about in a coherent fashion, or that it lacks coherent conceptualization. Have others read it so that they can see what it is you're saying you want to do. Because if it's not clear to your neighbor, it's not going to be clear to those who are judging it. Rhetorical language is usually not well received or is emotional pleading. These are things that we mentioned just before. Robin, you have other things to add to these calls?
I'll just say that clear, simple writing. And there was a meme that I saw go by somewhere in social media that basically said, you know, in college you're taught 15, your paper has to be minimum 15 pages. But then you get into real life, and in real life, the thing is, explain this to me in 7 seconds or I'm out of here. And there's a lot of truth to that. And you don't want to gloss things over, but you want to make it very clear and understandable, and avoid not only the rhetorical language and emotional pleading, but also avoid a lot of jargon. So keep in mind there's a human being reading not only your proposal and making a decision on your proposal, but they're reading probably 30 or 50 or 150 proposals. There was a couple of places that I have applied to that open their window. They announce when they're going to open it, and they say, we will accept the first 150 applications. And then the window closes whenever they hit 150. So, you know, you can see that, you know, some human being has to sit there and plow through all that stuff. And if you are not easy to read and are not explaining what you want clearly, is going to go in the probably not pile and get to it later. So that's where that sits with me. Tom?
Thanks, Robin. And last, I think what I will say is we've gone a little bit over and we want to leave a little more time for question and answers, and we have some time to do that. But we are also open to helping you as grant seekers. And so our numbers are published, and you can give us a call. The other thing that I would say is tell a story. In other words, use all of the kinds of things that we have said about the elements of a good proposal to tell a story, so that I know that this organization has background to do these kinds of things, and that you are proposing to do more in the future and better, and have a nice way of looking at it. And that story, I think, starts to run a narrative that will help you more in proposal writing than almost anything else. Robin and I hope we've given you some notions of this. We didn't get a chance to look at the guidelines because couldn't get them. But on the other hand, that's pretty easy. Fill in the blanks. Look carefully at those kinds of things. If you have questions, ask them, and get that proposal into us on time. Now we'd like to kind of take the next slide. And this is our idea of shaking the money tree. And as Porky the Pig used to say, that's all, folks. And now I'll turn it over to Pat, who will take some time at the end and then open it up for questions. Pat, thank you very much for letting us do this.
Thank you and Robin very much. This was very refreshing for me, since I haven't written a grant for a while. We are happy to answer any questions at this point. I will recommend that you put those in the chat, or if you have an elaborate question, you can click on that little raised hand and you can, we'll let you ask it verbally, orally. I wanted to just say a couple of things. Really, the grant application forms are now online, and they are due December 1st. So if you are a current grantee, you will realize that the form has changed a little bit. Tom and I have gone over that form a little bit, and I think it's easier and clearer, and the flow is a little bit better. We have liaisons assigned to current grantees, and as Robin or Tom mentioned, you are free to contact that person with any questions or help that you may need. And as Tom suggested, the slide deck will be emailed to you afterward, and you're welcome to use it and go to those links that they've recommended. All very good resources. So we're ready to go with any kind of dialogue that you would like to contribute.
And I don't see any questions popping up right now. We had some during the presentation, but mainly those were asking if the presentation would be available afterwards, because I think people do want to click those links. And we got a couple emails about that as well. But yeah, I don't see any questions or hands raised right now. You guys did a great job.
I do see that this
Nope,
is.
I see a couple hands now. So,
I do see this is being recorded, so.
so I'm gonna, I do see a couple hands. I'm gonna actually, Terry Osborne, I'm gonna allow you to talk. So, let's see here. Ask you to unmute. Oh. Terry, do you want to say something? You are unmuted, Terry, if you want to talk. All right, maybe we'll come back to you, Terry, so hold on. And then we do have Nama. I'm gonna unmute you, Nama. Nama, if you could unmute yourself. Oh.
I'm sorry, I wanted to say thank you for a terrific presentation. It was really, really helpful. I'm talking from Israel and watching the sun setting over the sea right now.
Terry, do you want to try to unmute again if you had a question, or you could drop it in the chat box? Okay.
I'll just say, well, we have this lull that you will be getting an email with an evaluation form. We'd love for you to fill it out and return it so we know how we did today.
Great. And Terry, you are unmuted if you can speak. We also had Norman in the chat box say, this has been great and we appreciate it covering grant writing in general. Can the Arts Commission resources, maybe our liaison, continue this dialogue just beyond the commission grants? So
I think the answer to that question is yes. Contact your liaison. We also talk to each other as a commission. So if there's an answer to a question that someone doesn't know, we can certainly figure out the answer. And I would say that those who are applying who may not be registered for this but haven't applied in the past, we also can help with new applicants and would like to see them. So don't be afraid to call the number. Joe can reach one of us. There's no question about that. So call the commission and she'll get somebody to call you back. I think, is that true, Johanna?
yes, absolutely. And we also have another raised hand. I'm going to allow you to talk. The name is SMJ327V. I know. So if you can unmute yourself, you can ask a question. Let's see. It appears we're having some issues with the unmuting. Let's see.
In the chat, I see the question there is how can
I tell a story in two sentences or less? Yes, it's very difficult, but I think if I can look at what the illustrations of, let's say, the values and the mission statements that I used, all of those tell a story. And I think 2 sentences probably means longer than just 2 sentences that you would see in comic strips, but nonetheless, I think in a short amount of time you can tell the story. Here's an example. We are the ABC Arts presenters, and we present X, Y, and Z kinds of art for the education of the citizenry of Williamsburg, and we are planning 4 exhibitions for the next year, for which we are seeking support of. That's a simple story. It has the inclusion of all of that narrative stuff, and that's the abstract of the proposal. Then after that, you can elaborate on it more. And that's what I'm really saying. Try to get some of those pieces in the mind that when you talk to somebody, you can say that over a cup of coffee and then elaborate if you must. And if you must, is the other parts of the proposal, which you can construct narratively a little longer. That's what I'm really saying. I hope that answers the question. Robin, you may have some addition.
One thing you can do, Tom is emphasizing telling the story about your organization, what it does, and what the proposal is for. But you can also use past successes to illustrate what kind of success you can offer for this current project. So you could say something like, last year, over 1,000 people were served by this project, or last year, 2 of our students managed to secure scholarships through their work with us, or whatever your past successes were. And if you can get testimonials, even better. If you have someone or several someones who experienced some kind of success through your organization, you could say something like, Mrs. Smith, the teacher for 5th grade at such and so elementary school, reported that her class became very interested in the arts, or whatever. I mean, I'm kind of trying to make something up here, but if you can use a real world example to illustrate the value that you're offering with your project, that also is helpful.
Great. Terry, I know you're having some issues unmuting or just some audio issues in general. You can always shoot me an email and we can help find an answer to your question as well. But I don't see any other hands raised right now or any other questions in the chat box.
Well, especially many thanks to Robin and Tom for your efforts and your preparation. I think this has been helpful to our development people. And if you have additional questions after you revisit the slide deck, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. I think maybe we can conclude at this point. And so you'll all want to, we've got your registration emails, and that's the email address we will use to send the slide deck and the evaluation forms that we would like you to send back. I see another chat question.
Oh, there was a thank you. Norman said, thanks. We're good. And I also want to add that on the Arts Commission website, we'll post a link to the deck as well as a link to the video once it's up.
Excellent. Thank you all. This has really been, it was a nice audience, and I hope you found it worthwhile. So I guess we'll say goodbye for now.